Boy, the homosexual agenda, and the Disney empire. The movement Don started paved the way for Christians to boldly stand for truth and righteousness in a hostile culture. Watch Culture Warrior today for free. Visit culturewarrior.movie.
Jenna Ellis in the morning on American Family Radio.
I love talking about the things of God because of truth and the biblical worldview.
The U.S. Constitution obligates our government to preserve and protect the rights that our founders recognize come from God, our Creator, not our government. I believe that Scripture in the Bible is very clear that God is the one that raised up each of you, and God has allowed us to be brought here to this specific moment in time.
This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
Good morning. It is Wednesday, January 7th, and a lot going on in the year ahead for 2026 and a lot of predictions, including what should we expect when it comes to artificial intelligence. The Trump administration and particularly Vice President J.D. Vance have been very focused on artificial intelligence and ensuring that the United States stays ahead. And Forbes even has 10 AI predictions for 2026. And we'll go through a couple of them, but really they're predicting that China will close the gap with the United States on chips and that companies outside the AI space will look to make AI acquisitions. So what do we make of all of these predictions and more? Let's welcome in Patrick Hedger, who is the NetChoice Director of Policy. So where do you forecast artificial intelligence to go for 2026?
Yeah, those are some really, I think those are the two most accurate predictions on that Forbes list that you listed there. But overall, I think folks need to understand that what we're looking at is a really important general purpose technology, something that will be as ubiquitous as perhaps even electricity itself in our economy, that we will have machines powered both by AI and electricity, powered by data. And so this is not just the chatbots that you interact with at ChatGPT or Gemini. This is a technology that can enhance manufacturing, can enhance medicine. Basically, every industry will be touched by AI.
Wow, it's really fascinating to see how sharp the curve has been since we even began the AI discussion. And in terms of policy, this is something where I think there's also a very wide gap between what the Trump administration and what a lot of their tech policy experts are focused on versus what Congress is actually looking at. How do you see the legislative piece and the regulation oversight in maybe some good and bad ways that Congress is and is not looking at?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of giving out scores or report card grades, the Trump administration is getting an A on this. The administration officials are doing great in terms of setting the course and laying down what is necessary for America to succeed on AI, and in terms of talking about that we need a federal standard, that this is ultimately an interstate technology, an interstate service that needs to be regulated at the federal level, and that we ought to take an innovation-first approach, not a regulation-first approach. Unfortunately, Congress is a little bit behind here. This is an area where Congress should be passing ultimately a national standard. The Trump administration can only do so much. This is something that Congress needs to do, and they're behind. They're behind on putting forward a national data privacy standard, for example. That's something that would have been applicable to previous technologies and is also important in the AI context as well. But ultimately, Congress has got to put forward a regulatory framework that matches what the Trump administration is calling for.
Yeah, and that's so interesting to me to see that Congress just doesn't seem to be moving really on anything that they should, and AI is one of those issues. They always seem to be a lot more focused on, inter-party bickering and some other things, but not really a lot of legislation that they should. So, what do you attribute this lack of putting in place some of these things that we're talking about? What do you attribute that to in Congress? I mean, I'm sure that organizations like NetChoice and the Trump administration as well, and other policy experts are asking for this. So why are they so behind?
Yeah, I think it's because there's really narrow margins in Congress right now. And so it's very easy for folks that are anti-AI or anti-innovation or, pro-government in terms of government being in control of these technologies and getting to say in controlling innovators, if you will, have an outsized influence to be able to kind of gum up the works. And I think that's sort of the big issue that we have now. But that's why we emphasize that, unfortunately, we're in a race in AI with China. There's no other real option here. The Europeans have essentially regulated themselves out of the technology race. And so we either have a future where this technology, as I said, that will influence basically every industry, is either controlled by American companies and developed by Americans, or is going to be developed and controlled by Chinese companies. And so that we cannot afford to have American AI move at the speed of American government. As we know, whether we're looking at the National Environmental Policy Act or what have you, the FDA or any other regulatory body, drug development and energy development and all these other things that are regulated in the United States have crawled to a snail's pace in terms of innovation and development. And we really cannot afford that with AI.
And I'm speaking with Patrick Hedger, who is the Net Choice Director of Policy. And this Forbes article also forecasts details of research and technology that will leak and influence the broader AI ecosystem. From a policy standpoint, how should we then balance national security, innovation, secrecy, and public safety with AI, and what are the real practical implications of getting behind China?
Yeah, so something that the Trump administration is doing that's really great in terms of ensuring that we have AI that's advancing advanced sciences by utilizing this information is the Genesis mission. And that's something I would encourage everybody to look into. This is an announcement that the Trump administration made late last year about allowing for public and private sector collaboration to utilize some of the classified information that the U.S. government has to make major advancements in areas like fusion technology, nuclear, and also in medical areas and material sciences. So that's a really exciting thing that they're doing, and they're putting in place really good parameters to enable that kind of public-private partnership while ensuring that information remains secure. So that's something that I would encourage folks to look at. That's really exciting. But, the practical application here is if we fall behind the Chinese, what we saw really in the last several decades is that the internet itself was built and developed by predominantly American companies. What that's resulted in is trillions of dollars in wealth flowing into Americans' 401ks and a major cultural influence of the United States spread across the world. And the internet itself is a domain for free expression and free enterprise. But if we don't do the same, if we don't have that same position with AI, there's something that White House AI czar David Sachs has said, all future software will be AI. And so if we're not in that same position, you have trillions of dollars of wealth and major cultural influence being concentrated in Beijing, not here in the United States.
And by major cultural influence, do you mean the programming bias of AI, or what exactly do you mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. We've already seen that Chinese AI systems, they provide a version of their truth that excludes topics that are sensitive to the Chinese government. So that's just one small example, but we ultimately, you don't want our major adversary to be hoovering up all of the world's data.
Yeah, I mean, that could have a lot of other implications, and certainly for national security. But the use of AI, and I mean, I've used ChatGPT and some of these tools more, and seeing the bias, and sometimes even just in the phrasing of the prompt. If ChatGPT comes back and says, "Well, no, I can't." I can't fulfill that task or answer that question because it's too politically biased, or some of these things. It tends to be a little bit biased against a more conservative position, which I think is interesting. Even though there are a lot of even reports that conservatives and pastors even are getting sermon notes from ChatGPT, which I think is a little bit lazy, but at the same time, it can be a tool functionally just to aggregate a lot of data quickly. But the problem is that I think a lot of people are trusting in their prompts, and then ChatGPT to not have a bias back, and to say, oh, this is just an aggregate of what I need to know based on that. And it seems like this analysis, or this skepticism of ChatGPT, is the same failure of skepticism that we've had previously for like Google search results. And we all saw, when that was being manipulated to put things, for example, favorable for the Democrats in the early search results. And so how should that be ultimately regulated, or at least maintained, especially assuming the United States gets to do this, not China, but to have that kind of information to ensure that it's a lot more factual, but then it's biased when the user actually wants it to be.
Yeah. What's tricky here is that you don't want to create a regime where you have the government going in and essentially regulating speech and regulating information. That tends to start to run into the First Amendment there. And while I understand the bias concerns, the ultimate answer there is to make sure that we have a dynamic economy and a dynamic AI sector where consumers are able to choose between lots of different competing services. And thankfully, right now in the AI sphere, we do have a number of competing chatbots. You don't just have Gemini and ChatGPT, but you also have Grok as well. That's run by X, Elon Musk's XAI. So there are a number of other options as well. You have Anthropic with Claude and a bunch of others that are coming online. But we want to make sure that there is still space for smaller entrepreneurs and smaller companies to innovate and produce competing chatbots as well. And that's why I think it's really important that we be cautious in terms of taking a knee-jerk regulatory approach where you essentially lock in the existing players who have the resources to comply with any sort of new regulatory regime, but you box out a potential upstart or an AI system that is working to compete by challenging some of the biases and model weights that you see in the existing models.
Yeah, and this is also fascinating. I mean, it seems like it's so quickly outpacing what some of the projections were, maybe not to, some of the tech experts here, but, all of these concerns also raise, as you mentioned, there can be some First Amendment concerns. And what about privacy as well? Because especially with tools like OpenAI suggesting that the prompts and the conversations can be public, does that raise privacy concerns that other types of internet usage in the past didn't?
Yeah, I think the privacy concerns are really similar with AI to previous technologies. And again, as I said earlier, this is somewhere where Congress has dropped the ball, even in the previous era of information technology, in the previous internet era. We have been asking for a national privacy standard to avoid a lot of the problems I just talked about with regulatory capture and regulatory barriers by having 50 different state privacy standards instead of having one national privacy standard that applies both online and offline. Your grocery store knows a lot about you through your customer card, for example. What's being done with that data? How is that data being secured and stored? Those are questions that are still out there, and those have important ramifications for AI as well. So if Congress really wants to, spur AI innovation, but also innovation in a lot of other sectors, getting a national data privacy and security standard on the books would be extremely helpful.
And I'm speaking with Patrick Hedger, who is the Net Choice Director of Policy, on the impact of AI and some of these predictions for 2026 and beyond. When it comes to privacy, I mean, this is always, to me, a very interesting legal question, and to see how even the public perception of privacy has shifted so much in the more booming tech age, and what we would have considered privacy back even in the early 1990s, which I can remember being born in 1984, compared to now, and just to see how the younger generation, I mean, they're just so willing to share their location with friends and to turn on all of these technological advances that really eliminate a lot of privacy. And obviously, they're choosing who they share it with, but at the same time, as you mentioned, that's going to various companies, and it can be curated as far as data points. Where is that being secured? What's being done with it? All of those questions. But the ultimate question of privacy, do you think from a legal standpoint, and even more broadly a constitutional standpoint, the definitions and the expectations of privacy have shifted in the modern era?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's something I like to say, which is that one person's privacy is another person's inconvenience, right? The way that the modern internet works right now is that you get targeted advertising, right? It's based on, the services learn about you and try to match you with advertisers based on what they know about you. And that's generally very good for the advertisers. It's also very good for consumers as well. They see products and services that are very relevant to them, maybe useful to them, but they wouldn't otherwise, maybe just watching TV, for example.
Scrolling Instagram is my downfall, man. Yeah, scrolling Instagram is my downfall, but I love it because I see so many products in the way you're mentioning. Yes.
Yeah, so we don't want to eliminate that, but it's about enabling choice, transparency, and also we don't want to try and regulate too much in the subjective side of privacy. Again, some people's definition of privacy varies significantly. What we want to do is try and regulate as much as possible on the objective side, which is related to how data is actually stored and secured. I think the number one thing that people are really concerned about is when their information is leaked, right? Nobody's upset when they give their credit card to Target, but when Target leaks that, is breached and that credit card information goes out, that's the problem. So how do we put in place encouragement, perhaps safe harbor protections for companies that are meeting the basic cybersecurity and data security standards to be able to protect consumer data?
Yeah, and and just in the last few minutes here, and I could talk about this all day. It's just such a fascinating topic, and I appreciate your expertise and coming on this morning. But so given the complexity and the impact of all of these predictions and privacy issues and everything we've talked about, what role should public education and civic AI literacy play in just having the public more aware of some of these dangers that, they may not even think about privacy and just assume that it's implicit when they're using a tool on their phone, but they're not necessarily considering what Congress should be addressing?
Yeah, this is somewhere where, again, the government is a little bit behind. Forget the AI age, even in the internet age, we should have been having a much more robust curriculum around online safety because we know kids are going to be online, whenever they get online, they're going to be online for the rest of their lives. All of us use the internet every single day, and this is an integral part of our economy. And much like we have driver's ed, we ought to be having online safety education as well, because we acknowledge that this is a reality of modern life. And this is something that is even more imperative as we move into the AI age. And it's also important that as AI moves into more and more parts of our economy, that kids are understanding what it is and know how to utilize it to be able to enhance their own careers, be able to utilize it as a tool because it's going to be in the workplaces. So that's somewhere where I think the states can take a strong lead. We've seen in states like Florida, for example, a push legislation and now a law requiring online safety training in the schools. And that's something that can be expanded to all 50 states, and that's something where parents should be brought in as well. There's no reason we can't have public education campaigns around this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Patrick Hedger, thank you so much again on your expertise and the article. If anyone else is interested in reading all of those 10 different predictions, it's in Forbes. It's titled "The Year Ahead in AI: 10 AI Predictions for 2026." All of this is so fascinating. It has a lot of implications for you, your family, and especially for the country moving forward. So we'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis in the Morning.
So right now may be the perfect time for you to rethink how you pay for health care. And here's why. This time of year is decision time for a lot of people, but it's also when you can join MediShare and save even more than usual. For many families, joining MediShare means saving about $500 a month, which is a game changer for a lot of people. More than 1 million people are now part of healthcare sharing because it just makes so much sense, especially right now. And MediShare is the gold standard. Members like it a lot. We know this from member surveys. MediShare has been around for over 30 years. It is a proven thing. And if you join before January 15th and you mention the promo code SHARE, they'll waive your application fee, so you save $100 right off the bat. I'll give you the number here in a second, but just call. You'll get a price within 2 minutes. And again, the deadline is January 15th, so call now. You'll save even more. Here's the number. Call 833-44-BIBLE. That's 833-44-BIBLE, 833-44-BIBLE.
The following is not an actor, but a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
My debt problem started probably about 2016. I needed my life to change financially. I called Trinity and I ended up joining based on high credit card bills and high interest rate. And my counselor at Trinity has been great, and Trinity has been helping me to get on the right path of paying off these credit card bills, bringing down the interest rate. They have consolidated my bills into one low monthly payment. And now I am finally getting out of credit card debt. So I just want to say thank you, Trinity, for showing me a better and greater path.
If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
My name is Sharon, and soon I will be debt-free for keeps.
1-800-788-1813.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starnes. Stand by for news and commentary next. A Minneapolis Hampton Inn is in the national spotlight after they refuse to provide rooms for federal agents. The Department of Homeland Security says the hotel chain's decision is unacceptable. They accused Hilton of siding with murderers and rapists and undermining law enforcement. In response, Hilton said that particular Hampton Inn was actually independently owned and operated. Everpeak Hospitality posted a statement apologizing for what happened, said they don't discriminate. However, an investigative journalist filmed a clerk at the Hampton Inn refusing once again to provide rooms to federal agents. Corporate headquarters stepped in, said the independent operator is not meeting their standards. As such, they've been removed from the company's reservation system. Now, Everpeak owns and operates 4 hotels in the Marriott and Hilton chains. The company is owned by Indian Americans. Maybe there's another reason the hotel owners did not want ICE agents on their property. I'm Todd Starnes.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. Well, heading into 2026, there are a lot of implications for the First Amendment as well. And the National Religious Broadcasters organization has been on the forefront of ensuring that we maintain those implicit God-given rights, especially for Christian broadcasters. And so NRB is also celebrating America's 250th anniversary. And so let's welcome in their CEO and President, Troy Miller. So Troy, Happy New Year. And, give us an overview of kind of where we're headed in the broadcast world, and especially as it relates to Christian broadcasting for 2026.
Good morning, Jenna, and thanks for having me. Happy New Year to you as well. Look, I think for Christian broadcasting, in on one sense, I think we have a lot of momentum in our sales right now. We did a study last year that found that 66% of Americans found that Christian broadcasting was both valuable and trustworthy. That is almost 100 times higher than the mainstream media has out there. And so, we have a big responsibility here, but we have a lot of headwinds to go against too. We still have an industry that I think looks at us as a thorn in their side. They don't like public interest programming. They especially don't like Christian broadcasting, and mainstream media would love to see us go away because we cover all of the subjects and topics they won't.
Yeah, which is so incredibly true. I mean, when I've been a contributor to other broadcast channels that are not explicitly Christian, it was very interesting to see some of the, for me to see some of the behind the scenes discussions on the production of topics and stories. Like, for example, when, Congress was trying to determine the issue of their quote unquote Protection of Marriage Act, but which we all knew was really a disrespect for Marriage Act, and pushing forward some of the same-sex marriage issues, and how even some conservative channels were still not explicitly Christian and not wanting to carry that view, which is why Christian broadcasting it's so important to protect that, so that we ensure that we protect the biblical worldview and getting that out there for not just people who want to hear that, but for people who may otherwise not even come across that. And so, what are some of the issues that you foresee heading into 2026, whether it's legal or constitutional on the First Amendment side, but some of the areas that we as Christians need to be aware of?
Well, I think one of them we have to watch is still the growing bias in corporate America against any kind of, Christian message. We've seen the Trump administration has thankfully cleaned up a lot of the weaponization that was going on in the various government agencies and institutions across the executive branch. But we're still seeing this growing bias in corporate America, especially on the social media companies. We still have a lot of our members that are reporting that their content is either getting, pushed down in the algorithms, or they're getting outright banned off of platforms for certain topics and conversations that they say. So that's going to be a big one going into 2026. Plus, we're looking at where the Federal Communications Commission is going to go on media ownership. There's been a big push to expand the media ownership levels across the country. Currently, corporations are restricted to only own about 39% of a market. And they can't own more than 4 stations. There's a whole bunch of rules there. We're really watching this one. We're getting ready to file on this. We see this expansion of ownership as a real issue, because I think we've all seen, Jenna, over the last decade, that large media organizations are not necessarily good for the population, and certainly not good for independent voices.
Yeah, absolutely. And in tandem with that, we've also seen, I think, the rise of a demand for more biblically centered and Christian content. I mean, especially with the assassination of Charlie Kirk in September, and seeing the genuine spark of revival across the world in the wake of that. It was a really good thing that there are so many Christian broadcasters that were available to meet that need, and pastors who could use some of these platforms to answer some of these questions that people were openly asking. All of those things are so important. And what has NRB observed about that trend upward, especially since September of last year, in terms of the demand for Christian broadcasting?
Yeah, I mean, from what we're hearing from ministries across the country is just a pretty good significant increase in, viewership, listenership, church attendance to Christian, conferences, especially Bible centered conferences or theological conferences. We've seen those conferences have seen, I think I heard anywhere from 20 to 30% growth in the attendance across the board. I think we see record numbers of attendance when they come out here during this Christmas holiday season. And you're exactly right. I think it's a real counter. Charlie Kirk's assassination, his murder, woke up a lot of the younger folks who found out that the left and the progressives were really lying to them about, their whole nonviolent movement and also a lot of other issues. So we've seen a lot of people turning to Christian media to get the truth. Again, even before Charlie Kirk's assassination, back with our survey last year, the number one and two reasons why people tuned into Christian media was to, first of all, to find encouragement and hope in a society that's constantly feeding them, conflict and other things, but also to find the truth and how it was going to make their lives better. And so that's so important for us to continue to build on that trust and to build on that kind of content that these younger Americans particularly are looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, the NRB is also advocating for the AM Radio for Every Vehicle Act on the Hill this month. And that is important as well to protect not only free speech and conservative voices, but particularly biblical content. And so, it may seem like, I think the counter to that is, well, people can stream, anything on demand. And it seems like, AM radio, there's not a lot of the younger people that are necessarily tuning into that. But at the same time, there's a reason that you're still advocating for that position.
Yeah, exactly. There's a couple of reasons out there. First of all, AM radio still has 80 million strong in listeners across this country. It still serves the number one outlet for the emergency broadcast system during times of natural disasters and other emergencies across the country. But it's free. It's free. You don't have to have an app. You don't have to download an app in your car. You don't need internet access in your vehicle. You have your radio. You just simply tune your dial and you can listen to what you want to listen to without anybody controlling that access to the car. So that's one of the main reasons we're advocating for this, so that the listeners in their vehicle, they have the choices available to them, free choice. If the car manufacturers get their way, you'll have to get a subscription in order to get internet service in your car. So there's one fee you have to pay. But the bigger thing, Jenna, is they now have control with that subscription of what you can and can't listen to. They could decide what apps show up on that app store in your car and what apps don't. And I'll give you an example of that. Just recently, General Motors has announced that it will no longer in its vehicles include connectivity for Apple CarPlay or for Android Auto. And that's, again, because they want to be able to control the access to that information. And like I said before, we've had way too much control by corporate America to information, to what should be free, available information to every American.
Yeah, I'm speaking with National Religious Broadcaster CEO and President Troy Miller, and that one issue, control of access to information, I think is the critical point, and hopefully what members in Congress will recognize as the critical point. I mean, there was, very, very famously, there have been a few different, lawsuits against other curators of content. And, even when you look at apps and things like Spotify, for example, where a lot of people go for their music, they have their different list. Well, if Spotify chooses to say, well, we're not going to have this song available, well, even if you have downloaded it, it's just not available through the app yet. I mean, I was, on Netflix the other day, and it was saying, leaving soon, this show and this show. And so it's like, you're not going to have access through that platform to certain content. And so I think we've become a little bit too conditioned in 2026 to say, well, I just have these subscriptions and whatever they provide, instead of actual ownership or ability to choose what I want to listen to or watch or any of that content, I'm just going to choose from whatever the provider curates and is pushing to me that is available. And there is a real bias there.
Oh, absolutely, a real bias. I mean, we have experience with this coming out of COVID. Look at how corporate America, corporate social media, and corporate mainstream media wanted to control all the COVID messaging, and of course, post that now we're finding out that all of the messaging they tried to control was really propaganda and indoctrination for their agenda on this. And we just looked at the January 6th events that happened yesterday. We had the same thing there. The narrative was controlled by a certain group of people. And we see it, like I said, we're still experiencing that bias and that discrimination today. So adding the auto manufacturers as one more now gatekeeper into that that's very, very harmful to the American public.
Absolutely. And I will just say as an Apple user, if they took away CarPlay, that would completely discourage me from choosing that car. Even when I go to rent a car, I always ask, I need CarPlay just simply for GPS and functionality, and just and because I'm so used to it, then it's easier for me as a driver to use the tools that I'm familiar with. But it just shows how so many different corporate interests are ahead of the actual experience for the user and wanting to foreclose some of my options and your options instead of making it more user friendly. And it seems like the focus on the consumer, if there ever really was the focus on the consumer instead of kind of what drives the bottom line, but it seems like there's less and less with the advancements of some of this technology on the consumer and choice and availability versus this kind of curated push toward bias. I mean, is that a trend that you're seeing with some of these issues?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, having come out of corporate America myself, I think there was a time where corporate America, you looked at your consumer, you looked at the folks who bought your products as a partnership. You were providing a service, you were providing a product, you wanted that to be the best experience for them. But in our technology world today, I think so many corporations just look at their customers as another data point. And again, behind what's in the car manufacturers here is if you control that access point to those consumers, then you can control all the data about that consumer. And while the subscriptions may be worth millions of dollars, the data tracking us and all of our habits, what we do, where we drive, what kind of businesses we pass on our way to work or our way to church, that data is worth billions of dollars. And that has really changed the corporate mindset of how they relate to consumers out there. It's not so much about a partnership anymore. Is that you, the consumer, are also a product for them to sell at some point to someone else.
Yeah, which just gets into what we were talking about in the first segment with privacy issues and data curation and where that is stored and how that gets to other people. And we have a real issue with privacy in the big tech industry. That is being shaped, I think, and determined for the future, especially with artificial intelligence, and then some of these other issues with car manufacturers removing these traditional radio hardware from their cars, and so many other examples. And so I think Christians need to be paying attention to these issues because it may not seem on its face like it's an issue like pro-life that we're ardently advocating for, and we all see those connections to the biblical worldview. But this really does have biblical worldview implications when we're talking about things like privacy, what our kids have access to, our data, how it's stored. I mean, all of these things really come back to founding principles, which are predicated on a biblical worldview. So how, Troy Miller, can people who are listening get involved in helping NRB advocate for this legislation and for Christian broadcasting overall in 2026?
Yeah, so you can go to nrb.org. That's our main webpage out there. We have sections that will cover all of the various policy issues that we're addressing, all of these issues with corporate America bias as well. You can also find out the different webinars and things that we do throughout the year to help educate people on these issues. And, of course, we hold the largest conference of Christian media professionals, the NRB's International Conference for Christian Media. It's going to be in Nashville, Tennessee, in February 17th through the 20th at the Gaylord Opryland Hotel. And it's a place for anybody who wants to really increase the way you do your communications, even on your own social media platforms, because really, Jenna, today, everybody is a communicator out there. And so you'll find out that you might meet your favorite radio host, podcast hosts, or personalities there, walk in the halls, and you'll really get a lot of information about what's going on in the culture today in the area of communications.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you there. And we're going to take a break here. Troy Miller, and he's going to stay on to join me in the next segment because I have a few other topics as well to discuss with him. But yeah, the National Religious Broadcasters event is always really great. And as you mentioned, I mean, almost everyone today, if you have any kind of social media, is a broadcaster. You're a publisher. And to optimize that to your own personal ministry, there's some really great tools available at nrb.org. So make sure that you check that out, and we will be right back with Troy Miller right after this.
America is about to celebrate her 250th birthday. In the beginning of our country, almost all American children were raised with a Christian worldview. That has drastically changed over the last 250 years. What's your opinion on what we can do to restore it? Your thoughts and your support will help us fight for our kids, and we'll give you the DVD Educated for Liberty with Stephen McDowell as our thanks. Visit afa.net/educate today. afa.net/educate. Women going through the ordeal of infertility or miscarriage experience pain and loneliness that are too much for words. The Hannah's Heart Conference, January 30th and 31st, 2026, at Hope Church in Tupelo, Mississippi, can help bring hope and encouragement with biblical teaching from Jane Johnson and worship led by Phil King. For more information or to register, visit afr.net/HHC 2026. afr.net/HHC 2026.
As an AFR listener, you may be familiar with the ministry of Preborn. Preborn has saved 38,000 babies' lives, and more than 4,000 mothers have made commitments to Christ in the past year. Now, we'd like to hear your Preborn story. If you or a loved one has had an interaction with Preborn, call in and tell us your story. The number is 877-876-8893. Maybe you'd just like to express support for the life-saving ministry of Preborn. Again, that number is 877-876-8893. Preborn has been saving lives and changing lives through the miracle of ultrasound, and this is another way you can support this vital pro-life ministry. Just call and leave us a voicemail of 1 or 2 minutes and tell us what Preborn has meant to you. The number again is 877-876-8893. Thank you for helping us promote the life-saving ministry of Preborn. It's so easy to politicize abortion, but the reality is there's a precious life at stake, and that little life doesn't have a voice. All that little life has is a heartbeat, and it can be heard as early as 5 weeks on ultrasound. That's where Preborn steps in. Preborn is a voice for the little ones.
They do an ultrasound, and that's when everything changed. Because when I saw my baby, and when I heard her heartbeat, that was it.
Preborn Network of Clinics offers free ultrasounds to women in crisis while showering them with God's love. This powerful combination doubles a baby's chance at life and has helped to rescue over 300,000 babies. To learn more about Preborn's life-saving work, call pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 baby, or visit preborn.com/AFR. All gifts are tax deductible.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back, and we are still here with National Religious Broadcaster CEO and President Troy Miller. And before the break, he was talking about how NRB is having this annual convention in Nashville next month, February 17th through 20th. And they're also celebrating America's 250th anniversary, hosting a celebration in partnership with the White House, which I think, Troy, is fantastic. That shows how much the Trump administration and this current White House is supportive of Christian broadcasters, the freedoms and liberties that we enjoy that are protected by the First Amendment, that are God-given rights but protected by the First Amendment. And so how has the Trump administration and this partnership with the White House really been helpful to Christians broadcasters? And do we still have Troy? Oh, and all right, so we're going to be checking on Troy Miller and seeing what about that connection, because I think he's still here, but our great producers, Devin and Adam, are looking at that. But and they're going to try to recall him. So while we're doing that, though, I can just tell you from personal experience that I'm so grateful that the Trump administration has this perspective on Christian broadcasting, on protecting the freedoms and liberties that are God-given and protected by the First Amendment. And can you imagine if Kamala Harris had been elected, and the differences that we would see between this administration versus what we saw in the Biden administration, the targeting of Christians for merely exercising our rights to advocate for and even protest things like abortion and other issues in policy. It's really incredibly important that we are thankful and grateful for what the Trump administration is doing. And I'm told that we have Troy Miller back. And so I was asking you, I'm not sure if you heard the question, but about NRB hosting a celebration in partnership with the White House to commemorate America's 250th anniversary, and how the Trump administration has been helpful in protecting the rights of Christian broadcasters.
Yeah, thank you. And they have. Boy, the Trump administration, again, this administration has probably been one of the friendliest administration certainly in recent history, if not going back a long time, to Christians in general, but particularly Christian broadcasters with a number of issues. The White House supports the AM Radio and Every Dash Act. They support the Local Radio Freedom Act. They support just a number of things that are helping Christian broadcasters move forward, plus the deregulation. And we started working with them all the way back in March of last year about the America 250 celebration. And Jenna, right from the beginning, the White House said we want to make sure we have a major component of this that talks about the Christian foundation behind the independence of our country. And so that's what we have been working with the White House on. We worked with them on the America Praise initiative that was just launched. And we're asking churches and individuals to be praying for our country between now and the 4th of July celebration. But our celebration is going to focus on that at the NRB convention. The rich heritage, the rich foundation of this country, that the fathers really built it upon the Christian principles. You get it everywhere from the Mayflower Compact all the way into the charters for the first states, and then, of course, into the Declaration itself, where it tells our rights, our inalienable rights, come from our Creator. They don't come from government. They certainly don't come from a king or a monarchy. And so that's what we're going to be celebrating and working, as we said, hand in hand with the White House's America 250 and now Freedom 250 teams.
That's amazing and incredible, and I'll look forward to seeing everything that is in store at the NRB convention. And in the last 2 minutes that we have here as well, I also want to talk about how the NRB is helping to combat Christian persecution worldwide. So you recently participated in a Christian persecution awareness event at the Museum of the Bible. One of the best spots in DC for anyone who may be going to DC in the forthcoming year. You don't want to miss the Museum of the Bible. It's just amazing. But also released a joint statement with Across Nigeria on President Trump's ISIS airstrikes, thanking Trump for acting decisively to protect persecuted Christians in Nigeria and for honoring his commitments on this issue.
Yeah, absolutely, Jenna. Right now around the world, nearly 320 million Christians live under some sort of an oppressive government that really persecutes them for their faith. Right now, the Voice of the Martyrs has said the most dangerous religion to hold, the most dangerous belief to hold is that of Christianity around the world. And Nigeria has been a hot spot for several years now. But this year in particular, the ISIS, the radical Islamic groups of the northern part of the country, they basically decided they were going to purge Nigeria of all Christianity. And so they would come into villages and tell people either 24 hours to leave, or sometimes they didn't give them notice. It just came in and slaughtered everyone. And so we have been working hard on this with a number of folks up in Congress. We were happy that the president, first of all, this last fall, once again designated Nigeria as a country of particular concern. That hits a whole bunch of policy issues in the State Department. But then finally, when Nigeria and when the rebels didn't, heed to his warning, we know that we have a president of action. And I know this has been a controversial issue within the Christian community, like when is it right for, Christians to engage in this? But the government, this is the government's role. The government has a role in protection. And we have to remember that it is just as sinful for us to not do things, the sin of omission, as it is the sin of commission. And so we have been supportive of the president in this area. He's also in Syria, in other areas around the country, and we're going to keep this issue right at the forefront.
Yeah, and it is so important, and I think it's really interesting to see how, for as much as we are advocates and we should be in the United States to continue to protect and preserve the freedoms and liberties that are God-given, that our Constitution, including our First Amendment, preserve and protect, and we are advocates for that, we can't forget as Christians that those very same rights that God endows to us here in America are endowed to every human being who is made in his image. And across the world, there are so many that don't even have the ability to exercise their God-given freedoms in the same ways that we do. And it's such a blessing and privilege to live in America because we can still advocate for these issues and we can exercise our first freedoms. But we can't forget about those people around the world that need so much more help. And I think it's incredible that NRB is helping with this. And, and it reminds me of the first Trump administration with the ministerial on religious freedom and how much the focus was on maintaining and advocating for religious freedom in, some of these countries. And I was actually just talking to Troy Miller. I was talking to President Trump's ambassador for religious freedom, that his nominee, that who hasn't yet been confirmed. I was speaking with him last night, and hopeful that the Senate will push that forward really soon. And I think they're getting a lot of traction on that, which is great. Be praying for that. But it's just yet another conflict between an administration, I think, that is promoting religious freedom, is partnering with organizations like the NRB, and others to do that, versus a Congress that just doesn't seem to have those same priorities.
Yeah. Congress is we have some great congressmen who have pushed this issue and made it to the forefront, but Congress is locked in so much of a bipartisan right now. It's really sad that they can't get things done. Even within our own party, we've had problems. Within the Republican party's had problems trying to get things done. So that's an issue. But look, the president has stepped up to the plate. He's not waiting for Congress to do it. He has two commissions now that are going on religious freedom, one looking at it from a broad spectrum, and then the Attorney General is looking at the weaponization of government that went on against Christians and against religion. And so both of those are great moves by the administration, and we applaud them. We're a part of those, and we just want to keep this issue going because, as you said, with all that God has blessed our country with the freedoms that we have, with the abilities we have, with the resources we have, I think with that comes great responsibility, and
Amen.
We can't simply, abandon the world for this isolationist kind of view.
So well said. And Troy Miller, I really appreciate the work that you and NRB are doing and look forward to speaking with you soon. Follow him on X. And as always, you can reach me and my team, Jenna at afr.net.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast